What is up, tube of you? I'm Jordan. I live gluten-free out of necessity because I have celiac disease, and today we're going to talk about 7 mistakes that I've made on my gluten-free journey so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did. Isn't that great? Free learning for you. Mistake number 1, not advocating for yourself when people give you food or when people have you over for dinner. There's a backstory with this. Shortly after I was diagnosed with celiac disease, a friend wanted me to come over for dinner and they didn't know anything about gluten, what was gluten-free, what had gluten in it, and that's fine. I don't expect everyone in the world to know what gluten is, especially people who aren't gluten-free. And this person asked me if baked chicken was gluten-free, and I just was like, well, usually, yeah, baked chicken doesn't have gluten. And I show up and they bought KFC, and because I didn't stand up for myself, I ate KFC and I got glutened. And we all know what KFC stands for. It stands for Kentucky Fried Gluten. That's right, the C stands for gluten. I'm pretty sure even the chicken is made from gluten. They basically just take gluten and fry it in gluten, and that's KFC. So if you don't advocate for yourself when others are feeding you or giving you food, you might end up in a situation like me. And me personally, I have a hard time inconveniencing people. That's hard for me. But I've learned, especially with celiac disease and needing to eat gluten-free, that you can't be too safe. Your health is so important. So if people are having you over or people are bringing you food, you should make sure you know what they're feeding you, what all of the ingredients in that food is, and that they're taking the precautions that you feel are necessary to make you safe so that you don't get glutened by their food. And to each their own. I'm not here to tell you how strict you need to be with people. Just that was a mistake that I learned early on, and I never want to repeat that. Similarly, number 2 is advocating for your needs when you are eating out. Some restaurants, you can specify that you have a gluten allergy, and then they'll take precautions like changing their gloves and making sure that surfaces are clean before they prepare food on them. And so I had gone for a couple years gluten-free without ever having done this and just asking for gluten-free options. I should have been asking them to prepare my food specifically so that it didn't get cross-contaminated with gluten. Again, early on in my celiac disease diagnosis, this is a big no-no. I went to a pizza place and got a gluten-free pizza, and I know that they did not do anything to prevent cross-contamination. They were definitely cooking that gluten-free pizza crust on the same surface. That was definitely cross-contaminated. Make sure you advocate for yourself. Number 3, I gotta get something for this one because I didn't grab it. Okay, mistake number 3 is not reading the whole ingredient label. And when I say about the whole label, I mean the whole label. You need to read the entire label, all of it, to see if it contains wheat, barley, or rye, to see if it contains gluten. I got in a bad habit of just skipping past all the ingredients and looking for the allergen statement that's listed after the ingredient. If there was an allergen statement and it didn't say that it contained wheat, for example, if it only says contains milk and that's it, I was like, oh, it doesn't have wheat in it. Great, it's gluten-free, so I'm safe. Well, the thing is, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, only considers wheat an allergy. It doesn't consider barley or rye an allergy. So barley and rye won't show up in the allergen statement underneath the ingredient list. I've actually consumed gluten because I was looking for wheat in the allergen statement and it wasn't there, but it had malt. In fact, it was this, I don't even know how to say this, Worcestershire sauce from Target. And we make some awesome marinated chicken in Worcestershire sauce. But then I realized that this Worcestershire sauce has malt vinegar in it, which is derived from barley. So basically, I was marinating chicken in gluten when I used this. That's right, this is Kentucky marinated gluten. It's KMC for those of you who are keeping tabs. So read the label, read the label, the whole label. Don't just skip over to the allergens like me. That's not a good way to live life. If you're finding this video helpful or enjoyable, I would super appreciate it if you would give that little like button a tappity tap tap. That way other people can see it and also benefit so they don't have to make these same 7 mistakes that I've made. Now we're moving on to mistake, I think we're at number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, we're number 4. Sorry, guys. Okay, mistake number 4 is assuming that things containing oats are gluten-free if it doesn't say it contains gluten, and that is definitely a mistake because glutes are not usually gluten-free unless they're labeled as gluten-free oats. And that's because oats get cross-contaminated with other grains like wheat and barley and rye when they're being harvested and transported. So regular oats, if they're not labeled gluten-free, don't actually meet the FDA's requirements of less than 20 parts per million gluten. So if, for example, if you pick up these snack bars that are made with oats, even though wheat is not listed as one of the ingredients, and even though it doesn't say it's not gluten-free, because it's made with oats that are not gluten-free, this product is not actually gluten-free, or at least not as defined by the FDA. If something has oats in it and those oats are not labeled as gluten-free oats, or that product isn't certified gluten-free, then it's probably not gluten-free and you should probably avoid it. Mistake number 5. I ate an entire pack of gluten-free Oreos by myself in 2 days. There, I said it. Well, maybe I'm ashamed of that now. I wasn't ashamed when I did it, although I didn't feel great after I ate that many Oreos in 2 days. And in case you're wondering, it's not really healthy to do that. There are no health benefits from eating an entire pack of gluten-free Oreos in 2 days. I'm not a medical expert, and none of this is medical advice. So I reached out to my cousin who's in med school, who's also not a medical expert, but he's in med school. And I asked him if he thought it was healthy to eat a package of gluten-free Oreos in 2 days. And he said it's good for your soul only, but not your body. I also wouldn't necessarily trust him on the soul part. I don't know if he's a good advisor as far as spiritual things are concerned. And then he also went on to add that actually that's just really bad for you. An entire pack of gluten-free Oreos has 1,760 calories, 77 grams of fat, 143 milligrams of salt, 275 grams of carbs, and 145 grams of sugar. This is 145 grams of sugar. Not the healthiest thing in the world. And like I said, you will not feel good after eating it. I do not plan on eating an entire pack of gluten-free Oreos again, because that is a no-no. Mistake number 6, using the same scrub brush to scrub things that had gluten on them and things that didn't have gluten on them. You should really use 2 different scrub brushes for gluten and gluten-free things, because if you use the same scrub brush and you scrub something with gluten on it, you're gonna just then transfer all of that gluten to whatever you're scrubbing that was gluten-free. We have 2 different scrub brushes. This gluten one has ugly nail polish on it because gluten is ugly, and it gets banished under the sink when we're not using it because that's where gluten belongs, is banished to under the sink. This is the gluten-free scrub brush. It's not ugly, it's beautiful, a lovely white and green combo. Ugly, not ugly, gluten, gluten-free. So use a separate scrub brush when you're cleaning gluten and gluten-free things. That way you're not spreading gluten. And if you have a gluten scrub brush, make sure you banish it under the sink. Last but not least, mistake number 7, making gluten-free sandwiches on Aweful store-bought gluten-free bread. Don't do it. It's not worth it. Right after I was diagnosed with celiac disease in college, every day for lunch, I basically ate gluten-free sandwich on super mediocre gluten-free bread. And I did that because I ate sandwiches every day before I was diagnosed with celiac disease. And I only had a few months left of college before I graduated. I just wanted to make things easy, so I just insisted on eating sandwiches even though they were on Awful store-bought gluten-free bread. And I just do not recommend that. Number 1, Awful store-bought gluten-free bread tastes awful. Number 2, it's really small, so the meat on your sandwich is just like hanging out of the bread because the pieces of bread are so small. Number 3, it's expensive. And number 4, directly replacing all of processed gluten foods with their gluten-free counterparts is really unhealthy because processed gluten-free foods generally are higher in carb, have more sugars, are definitely more refined, have more ingredients, not as healthy for you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to bake gluten-free foods or cookies, or that you can't even buy gluten-free cookies and cakes from the store. That's not what I'm saying. Just don't buy every single processed packaged gluten-free food from the store because it's more unhealthy, higher in sugar, and just overall not good for you. Those are my 7 mistakes. Like I said, hopefully you can learn from my past so that you don't make these mistakes. If you have any funny mistakes that you've made on your gluten-free diet or things you've learned that you want to share, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. This is Jordan, Gluten-Free Necessity. Peace.